Welcome to tonight's podcast with Ryan Sean O'Reilly, David Wilkinson, and James Rauch. This is There Is No Deodorant in Outer Space. Now, let's begin.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever the case may be. This is episode 2 of our podcast. With me, as always, is my two droogs.
Hello.
The bull-necked David Wilkinson.
Hi.
And the ever-millicent James Rauch.
Stop!
Can we use those words the whole show?
Yes.
Yeah.
In case you were wondering, if it's not obvious, we are going to be reviewing A Clockwork Orange, the book and the movie. The book, of course, by Anthony Burgess, and the movie directed by Stanley Kubrick. So, let's just go around. Well, do you guys have any thoughts about the last podcast? And
I enjoyed
shipwreck? You enjoyed it?
I had fun. 3 guys talking about books and movies.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
2 of whom had the right idea. 1 of whom was Ryan.
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
Wow,
there it is.
zing on you.
Okay.
But seriously, you're misguided.
Seriously, your ideas are horrible. Anyways,
Your comments on Goodreads. That's a whole podcast right there. It's like you're trying to get blurbs into Good Woman's Weekly Housekeeping magazine or something. Like, if you like being out in the cold, you'll love A Feast for Crows. Sorry,
I just
go
started
on.
writing reviews. Actually, I've only reviewed 2 or 3 books, and you're already pounding all over them. I love it.
You're like some menopausal Girl Scout eating tired soccer mom in your comments, so it's pandering to.
Pan,
Anyways,
anyways, okay.
I
So
cut you off.
let's just go around real quick, and everyone just give their initial impressions in 5 sentences or less of the book and movie. Let's go with you.
Initial
Thoughts.
like the first time I read it, 20 years ago.
No.
Or initial, this
Just
time.
your comments, setting up your thoughts for this evening. Ready, Jim? Go.
Okay. I forgot how violent this all was over the years. I used to love this book and movie, and it was kind of amazing watching it all again. Wow. I can't I couldn't remember being that shocked recently. It was shocking and provocative.
Okay. Excellent. Wilk, what about you?
I liked it. I thought it had a very nihilist, defeatist philosophy and it was different than what I thought. And it really spoke to me. I liked the book, and the movie seems a pretty faithful adaptation. So I like them both.
Yeah, I'll say, for my first impression, I'll say the book and the movie are faithful in an amazing way, and they probably stand on their own as well. And I think it's the depth that's there is surprising. With that said, the author of the book is Anthony Burgess. Jim, what can you tell us about him?
Okay, so he's British, first and foremost. Grew up and fought briefly in World War II, and he wrote a lot of books. He actually recorded over 250 pieces of music, and he wanted to be remembered for that more so than his books. Clockwork Orange was written in 3 weeks, and it sort of was based on something that happened to him when he was in World War II. His fiancée was raped, and she lost a baby. And he was not given leave to visit her while in the military. And and that sort of kind of spawned the whole book. And a lot of the things that happened in it were inspired by that event in his life. Sounds pretty terrible.
Yeah, and it's actually, if you think about that, the book itself is even more of an amazing piece, considering the personal tragedy that spawned it. It seems odd to me that he would write this book in the way that he did.
If your fiancé gets raped and you lose a baby, what would you do? Would you write a book from the perspective of the person who committed the crime and sort of exonerate them from it at the end?
To be fair, they didn't really lose the baby. They probably know where it is.
Well, You know what I mean?
Just died.
It's still like you point out, Jim. The book is actually written in the first person, and it's just interesting that he chose to do that after. And I don't know the timeline of when that happened to his wife and when he wrote the book. I don't think they are.
I think it was like 10 or 15 years later he wrote the book.
Well, I mean, given what that kind of makes sense. I mean, actually, that piece of information actually gives the book a pretty good context because, I mean, again, kind of we'll get into this more later, but I mean, I thought he was kind of saying, the whole thing about violence is that it happens. The only way to cure it is to kill it, or basically wait for it to age out of you. And I mean, if the guy was in World War II, that could have helped seep in and form that philosophy. Because I had no idea this was written in 3 weeks. It's pretty amazing. Just the language that they use in the book seems pretty complex.
Yeah, I did see that he wrote it in 3 weeks, and I think he also wrote it when he was returning back to England after being abroad, and he came, and I guess, because he lived a lot of his life, or various points of his life, in other countries, and I think when he returned home, the stuff that I read said that, England was sort of changed, and there was a lot of these youth gangs, roaming and roving around, and I guess that's sort of what he picked up on, besides also the personal event.
Yeah, the beginning of the whole, anarchy thing in England and sort of the soccer tragedies and all that stuff that started happening at that time.
Yeah, and I thought it was very interesting. I didn't realize he had such a musical background.
Yeah. 250. 250 works of music that he was hoping to be remembered for. Sounds like when he was 14, he had an epiphany. It was based on some sort of flute solo that he heard. It kind of was almost reminiscent of the way his character in the book was obsessed with classical music. And he taught himself how to play piano and sort of went from there. It was kind of crazy because they wouldn't. His parents would not support his musical interests because they said there was no future in it.
Turns out they were right.
So
yeah, he sort of lamented that he wasn't known for.
Yeah,
he wanted to be more known for his music.
Perhaps he wasn't that talented. I mean, the guy probably had every opportunity to make it as a musician when he was wealthy after the movie and the book, and he didn't do it. So clearly he wasn't that good.
Hitler's paintings all over.
Yeah. Hitler was great at genocide, horrible at painting. We all have our strengths.
Yeah, I mean, he did die. I read that he died like a multimillionaire, and he had properties all over Europe. And he had to, I think he left...
hit albums.
No hit albums. And he had to I think he left England to avoid their 90% tax thing at some point. And he went and traveled around in a mobile home and wrote some
he
books.
came to the United States and he was friends with the guy who wrote Catch-22, Joseph Heller.
Yeah.
Some interesting friends in his life.
Did you see that he also wrote the screenplay for Jesus of Nazareth?
Yeah. I had never heard that.
And he wasn't really religious. He was born Catholic,
no.
But
he didn't actually write the New Testament, though, right?
Well, that's debatable.
Just the screenplay it was based on.
Just a screenplay based on the New Testament.
Okay, but he did not write Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John.
Well,
we don't know.
Jim,
we don't know.
Jim, you want to weigh in on that?
It does not say that he did not write those on his Wikipedia page.
I guess we'll never know. He was remarried twice, and I think he had an affair on his first wife, which they kept secret from her, and I think he was also a big drinker.
Yeah, his dad was an alcoholic. Yeah. It sounds like he was as well.
I think in a lot of these pictures...
That always helps.
You see these pictures? The picture on his Wikipedia page, his hair is all scraggly. I mean, it kind of looks like a Wilkes Sky picture.
It does a little bit.
I took that picture at 8:55. So there's no picture. So that's what I look like right now. Should we not talk about Wikipedia? Can we move on to...
Let's talk about the
something
book.
Else.
Well, let's transition right here. You guys, I think both you guys had the edition of the book, at least if they don't all have it, with the introduction by him about his thoughts on the book and how he sort of complains about how the movie made the book so popular and how he felt the book was a little bit misunderstood.
Yeah, can I speak to that?
It sounds like he didn't like Americans.
Yeah, well,
maybe because they raped his wife.
Well,
I don't know.
Whose wife hasn't been raped by Americans at one point? When I read the introduction, he seemed very bitter. I mean, he's one of those classic one-hit wonders and just seems very upset that I'm only known for this one thing. Well, maybe that's all you had. I mean, sometimes people are Harper Lees. They're not all Stephen King. Maybe they only have one good story to tell. That's his problem. He clearly wasn't a good musician. His other books didn't really take off. Maybe this was his big story. It was pretty good, but yeah, beyond that, not so much. But yeah.
And don't you wonder how much of that language was actually language that was used probably while he was growing up and just makes no sense to us now and seems like really unique and crazy, but is maybe just the way they talked then?
Well, we should probably tell the people that are listening, the thousands, that the book itself is written in a dialect that's not used now or ever. It might be based on a Yiddish language. It makes it kind of challenging to read.
It's referred to in the book as Nadsat, Nadsat, I think, and it was based,
which means teenager.
Yeah, it was based on Russian, and I think also, I don't know if it's a Welsh or Cockney slang, and part of it's a play on the phonetics of words to make them misunderstood by adults, something that teenagers would do, but part of it's just Russian. And actually, I was looking at a website tonight, and they have a glossary of the book, which is another point I'll make about that, and it actually shows the word he wrote in the book, its translation for the book, and then it shows the Russian right next to it. And a lot of the words, it like reads right through to the Russian. It might be changed a little bit, but a lot of them were just based on Russian. And a lot of people have read into that and saying, is this book really about communism? And I'll just add real quick that there is no glossary to the book, and apparently Burgess insisted that no glossary be included with it, which is an interesting choice, but I think he tried to purposely write it so that you didn't need one, although I think a couple times I might have looked on the internet to look up a word or two. But for the most part, I think you can just read through it with context clues.
And you start to learn the words, too, which is kind of disturbing because you start to think in those words, and a lot of the things they were doing were terrible at the time, so it was interesting to me.
I thought it was kind of funny.
The words?
No, I thought the book was kind of funny. I mean, never struck me as being that terrible, the things, well, okay, some of the things are terrible.
Rape?
But,
murder?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was manslaughter, but
it is sort of comedic. I think that's what I lost over the years. Like, becoming an adult.
The thing. I almost
a rape and murder are usually funny.
Murder,
No, if you do it right, yeah. Like, oh, jeez, okay, but I almost thought there was a false narration at times too, kind of very Catcher in the Rye-ish, where we're listening to this whiny teenager talk about things, and I'm not sure the things he's talking about were actually happening. But there's a scene in the movie where he has sex with two girls he picks up in a record store, and in the book it's very different, where he rapes and drugs to 10-year-old girls. And part of me thinks, I mean, it didn't seem that consistent with him overall, though. I almost thought he was...
Really?
Well, really, yeah. He never did anything... He only did things in a group. And the things he did in a group, the crime he got convicted of was one that went awry, where he, didn't mean to kill the lady. She died later at the hospital of injuries. But, yeah, I mean, I almost wondered if everything he said that was happening was actually happening. In terms of the crimes he committed and things of that nature.
It is written in first person, and I think you would call it an unreliable narrator, because obviously the character's personality, he's sort of a despicable person in a lot of ways. But one last point about the language is I think Burgess also said that he used that language to sort of, because he was almost afraid as a writer to write in detail the violence and tragedies that were going on, and the language sort of gives you a distance. And I think a second point to that is that it sort of sucks you into, almost like hypnotically, into this demented character's head, and you kind of get lost and get a little sympathy for him. And I think that sort of mirrors the brainwashing that happens later. As a reader, you almost get brainwashed with this made-up language.
Well, to be fair, I don't think he was actually brainwashed at all. That's the point. I mean, like, they drugged him, they conditioned him. So when certain things happened, the drugs would. That was my take. That was really the only sci-fi element. They put a virus of some kind in his body because they obviously took it out later. They cured it. However they did that, that was kind of unclear to me too. But as the virus was going through his system, they showed him images that when he saw later in real life would cause the virus to hurt him. I mean, it wasn't so much brainwashing would have been easier, but I mean, that was really the only sci-fi. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure this is even a sci-fi book. I couldn't really tell if it took place in the future. When was it supposed to take place? I didn't really pick up on that either.
I don't know that they have an actual date set, but I don't think it wasn't a virus they introduced to him, but you're right, they introduced to him, I think, just medicines, like emetics they would be called. It's like a sort of a take on aversion therapy where you show something to someone and you make them violently ill so that they associate the violently ill feeling with the thing you don't want them to do. And really, I was thinking about this today, it's like if your dog crapped on your rug and then you hit it with a newspaper. It's sort of the same thing.
Except that it's not, because they injected him with a substance that would cause him physical pain whenever he saw those things. That was really, there's a whole third of the book dedicated to that, Ryan. It wasn't aversion therapy. It was an actual substance that stayed in his body. That was the whole point. That was the science. That was a science element.
Right. That was the science. You're right. It was a science element, but they were conditioning him to certain triggers.
It's a science fiction element, though. I mean, yeah, it's clearly that's the whole point, because it was stopping him. It was physically stopping him from doing something. It wasn't just a brainwashing or conditioning. It was a chemical process. I don't know. Maybe it's not a virus, but it was something that saved his body.
They clearly injected him. Beam, did you have anything else to add to biography? That was pretty much it.
I think that is about it.
Okay, so then let's go back to what we were talking about. Wilk, you were talking about the conditioning, the Ludwig technique. Why don't you explain that, so that in case someone hasn't read the book?
Well, the technique basically was they shot him full of some kind of chemicals, viruses, medicines, whatever, and why they were potent. They would strap him in a chair and show him things, and these things would then kind of latch onto his brain and make him sick when he did them in real life. So they'd show him rape and murder, and so he'd feel bad if he raped or murdered somebody. Physically ill, physically sick. Basically, they turned him into a giant pussy. I mean, like, after it was all done, people would come up, they had a big presentation in front of all these military men. They were kind of showcasing him and saying, look, we think this violent guy, and he's not going to do anything. And then they had this other guy that was very, effeminate, come up and slap him in the face, and he couldn't hit him back. He would get physically ill. He'd fall down. Then they basically brought in like a just incredible piece of ass. I mean, just a beautiful woman in front of him who's saying, hey, go to town, just wreck me. And he couldn't. Medicine made him sick. And it kind of reminded me of Simpsons episode where I think one of the kids, or Nelson or Milhouse, is on they have a shock collar on, and it's like, yeah, it shocks me when I do something bad or when I think about a girl I like. It was basically the same kind of thing where it would kind of govern all his emotions. So instead, he wasn't truly being good. He was kind of wearing a permanent shock collar.
You're saying he wasn't truly being good, and that comes up with the prison chaplain who. The whole reason he gets the treatment is because he goes to prison, and this is a new experimental technique to sort of reform prisoners, and it's not so much concerned with teaching them to do right as it is just making them unable to do wrong. And there is a prison chaplain that the main character ingratiates himself to by getting into the music of the prison system and helping play the music for the masses that they have. And the priest's objection is that you're not really reforming the person. Because you're not giving them a choice. You're making them physically ill. They have no choice to do good or bad, and thus they're not a person anymore. Which is one of the big points of the book is what does it mean to be good? What does it mean to be bad? And the main character even says, people always want to spend so much time thinking about why does someone want to be bad, but why don't they spend more time thinking why does someone want to be good? Which is an interesting question.
Oh, it really isn't. That's the thing. That's the point of the book. It's not an interesting question because we all know what good and what bad is. We all know why we're good and we know why we're bad. We do what we can when we want to get away with it or not. We do what benefits us. And frankly, the prison chaplain was we're not swearing, right? But we were. I would, say screw him because
you could swear.
Well, fuck the prison chaplain. I mean, that guy is just a lip-wristed cog in this book. I mean, the only thing that should be done with a piece of shit like the main character is to shoot him in the head and leave him by the side of the road. We don't need him. We don't need the good people. We certainly don't need the bad people. People are the most renewable resource. I mean, we all like people around us.
I like
but,
that.
I mean, but you're raping, you're killing. Why even put him in prison? Just shoot him in the head.
Now that's and Wilk, what you're saying, your point of view is the point of view that actually the prison warden takes, which is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Bean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that Wilk is onto something here. To be honest, it's like, when you take away someone's choice to do good or evil, that's a deep question, blah blah blah. But this guy raped and murdered for fun daily, basically. I mean, we don't need someone like that in our society. That's very true. And I don't. I kind of like how at the end he turns into sort of like a pawn for the government, to try to make themselves look good. Like, he doesn't really have any value then either. So I'm glad that he didn't end it in a way that the main character makes this total rebound and they kind of hint at that, but I don't know.
Well, let's not get into the end, but you make a good, interesting point about how he starts getting used. He does this technique, which is put in by the new government or the current government to, it's sort of a dystopian world, but not really, where we're led to believe there's a lot of violence going on, and the main character, Alex, is just a part of a bigger problem. And the government, these scientists create this technique to supposedly fix criminals, and the government latches onto that and uses Alex as a poster boy. And it basically, everyone seems to be using him just like how he used people. This is what I thought about. He would go around and commit crimes with his friends and use people to get money or get his jollies, and he even used people for alibis and stuff. And he starts off the book using people, and in the end, people start using him.
See,
which kind of flips it around.
I kind of take a little bit something different away from this book, and I always have. I almost feel like it's a critique on human society in general. It's not even so much a critique on right or wrong or good versus evil. It's like, the guys in this gang become cops, and it's like, sort of, it almost criticizes the whole quest for power that a person who becomes a cop is on, and, calls into question what causes them to want to be in charge like that. And I mean, I'm sure each of us in our own lives, at least I know I have, known cops who on a personal level are just horrible fucking people. And so I enjoyed that. And I like the fact that, he's living with his parents, he moves out, and all of a sudden there's this guy there that took his place, and his parents are like, feeling guilty about renting a room while their son is a rapist and a murderer who's in prison. And they actually are feeling bad about that. I just really enjoy this book. It's,
Yeah, the narrator basically at the end of the book says, I'm gonna get older, I'm gonna get a job, I'm going to get married and have kids because it seems like the thing to do, because that's what he wants right now. And I think all three of us really, we can all relate to that. When you get a little bit older, your priorities change, your values change, and the energy that you may have in youth, the stupid things that I did, that you two did, we were there for some of them, might not seem as appealing. And we weren't all rapists and murderers, whereas he is. So he's thinking, and I think the point of the book is that...
Yeah, it's like everything's sort of exaggerated.
Right, but the point of the book is that no matter what people say, no matter what they throw at you, no matter what some dickhead tells you you have to do, it doesn't fucking matter, because you're going to figure it out. You're going to get older, you're basically going to do what you want to do, and humans are kind of programmed to do things that perpetuate the species. And we all get older, we get more calm, and eventually we die. But nothing that they threw at this guy in the book changed him. Not his friends betraying him, not literal, reprogramming, not going to prison. What changed him was, fuck it, I'm old. I'm gonna have some kids,
But you know what I think, and of course what we're talking about is the last chapter of the book, and an interesting point to make is that the original American version cut out the last chapter. There was only 20 chapters, and the whole last chapter changes the ending of the book, of course, which makes where the character has a sort of redemption. Maybe
not
it's
a redemption,
but it's
the opposite.
It's different than if you took that chapter out. Now, I thought what interesting thing going on, it was with Alex and his three companions, there is different character arcs. If you look at him, his one companion, Dim, who's sort of like the muscles, and Dim, not real smart. He's a real
I see what
brute.
you did there. He's Dim. His name's Dim. Clever.
If his character arc in the book is that he's really good at violence. Alex sort of bullies him and beats him a few times just because he doesn't like that the guy is not intelligent, and he also wants to assert his power. That actually ends up backfiring against the main character, because then Dim allies himself with some of the other guys and takes revenge on him, and they sort of set him up to take the fall for a crime they do. Dim ends up becoming a police officer later, and when Alex gets out of prison and he has no way to defend himself if he has violent thoughts, Dim takes advantage and beats on him more. So you see that sort of world view, how that ends up. Now, if you look at Peter, who I think was the least violent well, actually, let's skip Peter. Georgie, who was also sort of violent, he sort of asserts himself and wants to be the new guy in charge, and then Alex has to put him down. Well, when Alex goes away to prison, Georgie, left to his own devices, ends up dying in his crime-filled lifestyle. The third guy, Peter, who was the least violent of all of them, when Alex catches back up with him after prison, he's on the straight and narrow. He's found a girl. He stops talking in this teenage made-up speech, and he sort of talks to Alex about, I don't do that anymore, and he's thinking about basically moving on with his life. And at that point, which you were talking about, Will, because I think there's 2 points to be made. And that
just talk for 2.5 minutes to summarize that.
Sure. I think Alex, he thinks about, like you talked about, creating life, and that makes him think about creating rather than destroying life, which is what he spent his whole life before, and makes him think twice about that way of life. He also has a job, because after he got out of prison, the government, to make up to him for this experimental thing they did to him, they gave him a job, and he's got a regular job, I think working in music archives or something, which throughout the book we're led to believe he likes music. And now he has his own money that he's earned the right way. And he makes a point in a scene. He's set up, after he gets out of prison, he goes, and he's cured, he gets back with it, he creates a new gang of troublemakers, and we sort of see him hanging out at his old haunt, getting bored, and he's reluctant to throw his money around like he did, because actually now he's earned his money, going to work and stuff. And I think that's another thing, is it's almost like a modern day lesson, which is the idleness of youth. The idle's hand is the devil's work. When you have nothing to do and you're left to your own devices, you just can destroy things. Whereas when he's busy, he has a job, he's also matured a bit more and a little bit more forward looking, then he starts to think about being more responsible, like being more mature, which is, I think, interesting to point out.
I guess. I feel like you just proved that you read the book by reciting all those fun facts from it, but in the end,
I don't have all the great thoughts that you have.
No,
clearly.
God, no. It's like you're a marriage counselor going through a divorce right now. Let's figure this out. I don't know. The end of the book, who gives a fuck? That's a problem. He doesn't really change, except
he grows up.
He just lives his life, and eventually, it's like the poison leaves the system on its own accord. Time heals all wounds. It's like, the thing is, you just can't rape people as much when you're 40 as you can when you're 20. It takes a lot out of you. It's taxing.
Well, I think you might say something. You might point at someone's at 70 years old, but I think at 40 people are maybe committing crime less, but they're not,
just as rapey as before.
What about the parents? His parents, who are not in the book too much, they sort of seem not real involved in his life. They look like they're just trying to work, make a living, but they're also not really on top of what he's doing. And I wonder if there's a point to be made about that, in that he's sort of detached.
He makes the point himself, saying, when I'm my parents' age, I'll have a kid just like me that I can't control, just like my parents. He sees himself becoming them. So his dad probably raped a whole bunch of people too.
A lot of raping going on here.
Jim, what did you think about the betrayals going on in the book? There's the betrayal with Dim and his droogs, and then there's the betrayal of the writer.
Honestly, I didn't really think a whole lot of it, to be honest. Like, the betrayals just sort of are things that happen to him. It's a story about growing up. It's like the same with everybody. I think that's why, the guy wrote 100 books or whatever, and this is the one everybody likes, because people can actually relate to this. So they all went through it. They made friends. They did crazy shit when they were growing up, and then they, for whatever reason, kind of fell apart from those people, and everybody went their separate ways, and eventually you grow up and have kids.
Yeah, it's like us. Beams betrayed me 1,000 times.
Yeah, well, it's like our story times like 1,000. Our story plus rape and murder.
Right? Some shoes get set on fire, you know? Cell phones get locked in cars. Watches go missing.
Yeah, instead of killing someone, we lit our shoes on fire.
I mean, these are all things we don't do anymore, but I mean...
Exactly, and he said specifically in the book, like, the reason why I do it, because they make a big deal at the beginning, like, as they're realizing how bad of a person he is, like, why are you doing these things? Why are you doing these things? And he says, because I like it. That's because that's the reason why he did those things, because he liked to do them. We did not like raping and murdering people, so we didn't do those things. And when he got older, he didn't either. So it's like, it's a very interesting book in that, you know, we do the things that we like to do. And, you know, the bad people like to do bad things, the good people like to do good things. At the end of the day, everybody grows up and has kids.
So do you think there's a chance for redemption for everyone? Is that what this book is saying?
I don't know if the book is saying anything. You know, if anything, what I took away from the book this time around is that no matter how much you fuck up and no matter how many people you kill and rape, eventually you'll get a boring job and you'll hate your life just like everybody else. And you know, that's the arc of our lives.
Well, and
beings.
I got the message out of the book, and even the movie that you can't change somebody. I mean, people can change themselves. They can change from within. All that nonsense. But I mean, you can't force change on somebody to make it stick. You can beat them, you can kick them, you can put them in a hole, but you can't truly change who they are. I mean, they have to do that, and that applies to all kinds of areas of life. People that are addicted to drugs and alcohol, people that are assholes, or, you know, it just, you know.
So then, if that's the case, should we do a forced modification like they're trying to do in using the Ludwig technique?
I actually would be okay with it, I think. Because, you know, when you figure people are killing and raping, that's you know, that's worthy of a mind fuck, in my opinion.
I agree with Jim, except to say this. I mean, I say, yeah, make them stop doing it, but why waste all the time and energy on that? Just shoot them in the head. I mean, that'll stop them from raping and killing too. You know, give someone else the job down the road that wasn't a rapist and a murderer. Just, yeah.
The book would almost be more interesting if he would have robbed like a Quickie Mart or something, and that's what they were, and that's what caused them to do what they did. And then the side effect being the music. You know, that's something that we haven't really talked about.
Well, let's talk about the music. Let's talk about it, because music is a really big part of this book. We haven't talked about it yet, but
you know what's interesting? A side note about the music. Have you noticed how many things were stolen from this book for other movies? Like the whole American Psycho thing, the guy being obsessed with 80s music, was totally ripped off from this book, if you think about it. Anyway, go on.
The main character really likes music. He really likes classical music, which is interesting because it sort of indicates maybe he might have some intelligence to him, and then that separates him from like the character Dim. But he's really passionate about music, and it ends up coming back at him because a side effect of this mind technique, this Ludwig technique that they put against him, is he has the same reaction to violence and sexual stuff as he does to music. So when he hears music, he also gets violently sick, and has to sort of get away from it. And that prevents him from doing, I guess, sort of an innocent thing that he used to like.
Yeah, really the only innocent thing that he used to like when you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a kind of a clever twist that he threw that in there, I thought, to actually like take something away from the guy, you know, the main character that has value, and I don't know, that was interesting.
Well, and I think the scientists make the point, oh, well, this is the punishment part.
Yeah. Yeah. That was actually probably one of the best parts of the whole book, to be honest, is that he included that in it. Without that, I mean, it's just, you know, 1 + 1 = 2, the guy's bad, then he's raped, and then he's good again at the end. The music thing kind of complicates the whole story a little bit. Like, there's actually something wrong with what they're doing when they're stealing his Ludwig van from him.
Yeah. Any thoughts about the name of the book?
I really don't understand the name of the book.
Well, if you would have looked on Wikipedia, and if you would have read the author's intro, I think Anthony Burgess, he has a couple different answers for it, but he claimed that Clockwork Orange was a early English colloquialism where they said, you know, someone's as weird as a Clockwork Orange, and I guess the meaning of it is a person, like a clockwork is something like like a mechanical
like
thing.
a clock.
Yeah, and then an orange is something that's living and juicy. So the main character becomes like a Clockwork Orange because he can't make his own decisions, yet he's a living person. But he's sort of now just operating on an automatic level.
Like a cyborg.
Well, I think that's it. Any other comments about the book?
No, I'm good.
Well, I mean, maybe next time read Wikipedia.
I mean, I read all that. It still doesn't make sense to me. But go on. Yeah.
Okay, Wilk. Let's start off with the movie's directed by Stanley Kubrick. Wilk, what do you have to tell us about him? Did you check Wikipedia?
I did. Stanley Kubrick is it's pretty well known. Let me give you some facts about him. He's a Jew, or was a Jew. He's a dead Jew, but he was a Jew born in New York, and he worked for Look magazine back. He was in World War II generation. He kind of came of age then. So in the 40s and 50s, he was looking for that magazine in New York called Look, doing photography. And him and some buddies, they wanted to get into film. So he actually made 3 independent films, full length, that were commercial failures before they picked them up to do a major studio film. And they were self-financed. They were made on a shoestring budget with his friends. Very Kevin Smith-esque, of his time. What kind of set him apart he wasn't a writer, and he wasn't recognized for being a writer, although that, plays in later. But it was his skill with the camera. He was obsessed with photography his entire life, and he actually invented a lot of tracking shots, and his use.
I think they said he was famous for like a rear tracking shot.
Yeah, and again,
what he used in The Shining.
They were used predominantly in The Shining, but he actually used them in a war movie that I've never seen. I'm blanking the name now. But Kirk Douglas.
Paths of Glory.
Paths of Glory, which frankly I'd like to watch. I mean,
yeah,
I watched a documentary about Kubrick, and I've watched 3 of his films in the last week, kind of getting ready for this, trying to find similarities and things of that nature. But he would often use the camera as a weapon, and on the set of all of his movies, he would encourage method acting by belittling, harassing, and getting into his actors' faces to make them really feel the role. And he often didn't know what he wanted to get out of the scene until he was, balls deep in it. And he's given multiple actors and actresses
or Yarbles deep in
it, yeah, nervous breakdowns. And Malcom McDowell did have a traumatic experience working with him, but ultimately he did like it. And which brings us to.
Well, let me pause you. The method acted. I think there was a story that that whole scene in the movie of when Malcolm McDowell, the rape scene where he's singing, you're singing in the rain. That was actually not planned. That was Malcolm McDowell came up with that.
Well, Stanley Kubrick felt the scene was too dry, and he wanted to spice it up, and they had to rewrite another scene in the movie too, because at the end, the F. Murray character, or F. Alexander character, he picks up on the fact that Alex was the person that broke his house because he's singing in the rain in the bathtub. So they had to actually go back and reshoot that scene because they had shot it earlier. It huge was of a budget. But anyway, shut up.
Wait. But
yes.
And that sort of was an impromptu thing that Malcolm McDowell came up with, and he liked it so much that they had to go buy the rights to the song. And I saw something on IMDb that when Malcolm McDowell years later saw the author of that song, I think it's like Gene Kelly or someone, he saw him at like a cocktail party or something. Like he came up to him, and the singer just like walked away from him. He was like still mad that he used that song in that way in that movie.
Yeah, I can't imagine why. That's I don't know.
That pretty much ruined that song forever. Well, not ruined, but changed that song forever in my mind. I can never hear that song the same way again. It's almost like Reservoir Dogs, like that. That song that comes on the radio. That it's like you can never unhear "Singing in the Rain" after watching this movie.
Quentin Tarantino, I think it was
every
Kubrick
major
fan.
director is a Kubrick fan. I mean, you can't help it. I mean, like almost every person that casually loves movies loves a Kubrick movie. I mean, he's really kind of hit every major genre. I mean, like you got your Tea Party people who love Full Metal Jacket. You got your liberal douchebags like myself that loves Dr. Strangelove, and then everybody kind of in between likes everything else. So,
and he always picked different material. He didn't have like a set thing he did, and he also doesn't have a lot of movies.
Yeah, he's not like directors that always do the same. Every director picks different material. It is the worst comment I've ever heard in my life. You're just saying things that mean nothing.
Well, look at doesn't Michael Bay, isn't he on his third Transformers movie right now?
Yeah, you're right. Stanley Kubrick's not Michael Bay. Michael Bay doesn't say making sequels. I hate you.
Yeah. So, anyways, but he also doesn't have a huge volume of work, right? I don't think he has he wasn't putting out. It seemed like he took his time more with the works that he was doing.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't. He did maybe 2 movies a decade. I think something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy.
He slowed down as he got older, but he was pretty prolific in the 50s and 60s. And, in the 70s, he did Clockwork Orange, and then he did Barry Lyndon, and then I forget what he did in 78, and he did Shining, 81 or 83. But, yeah, and a big problem with him slowing down, as far as getting here, he's after he made 2001, The Space Odyssey, he spent 5 years researching Napoleon. He had people go to Waterloo, look up archives, try and get interview, manuscripts from when he was alive, and he actually wrote a script based on Napoleon, and the studio wouldn't make it. And he had it lined up several times to studios, and they kept pulling the funding, and then finally one said, well, how about you do this Clockwork Orange picture? And it wasn't what he wanted to do, and he did it, and it wasn't, he just kind of fell into the project, read the book, and he was never really that into it. It was never really a passion of his to make this movie. He's basically told, if you make this movie for us, we'll let you do Napoleon. And what happened, the reason Napoleon never got made, was Kubrick pulled out of the movie promoting it. He actually banned the release of it in Britain.
You're talking about Clockwork Orange now, right?
I am. That's
okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was confusing the way you said it.
Okay, yeah. So what happened after the movie came out? There's a lot of people use the word controversy. It's words and means nothing. Basically, a bunch of idiots got pissed off about it and wrote letters to the editor saying, "Hey, it's filled with rape." Well, it's a movie based on a bunch of rapes in the book.
But this was a big deal because this movie was one of the first movies I think to get the X rating, and it was later it got they edited to give it an R rating, and it wouldn't get an X rating today, obviously, but it was banned.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, this movie, there is a lot of crazy shit going on in this movie.
But it was banned in England for 27 years.
That was done in the bequest somehow of Stanley Kubrick. So I'm not sure how the publishing rights work, but he was instrumental in having it banned. Once he passed, they allowed it to be released in England, but he chose to have it banned or not let it be released because he thought he was getting threats, and he was
getting death threats.
Yeah, he wanted to live peaceably in England for the remainder of his days. So, anywho, I'm done with Kubrick. So you go on.
I think him and Burgess both shared that love of Napoleon, although in their relationship, I think. The relationship soured later because I think.
Wait, hold on. They both love Napoleon.
I think Burgess had an interest in Napoleon as well, and that was one of the things they bonded over. I think because they sort of got along real well in the beginning.
The man or the ice cream? I like the ice cream.
Yeah, it might have been both.
It's weird.
It might be both. I don't know why you'd be limited to one. And I think are you thinking of Neapolitan ice cream? In any case, Burgess got sort of, I think, annoyed with Kubrick because Kubrick went to ban the movie, and then when all the controversy rose up for the movie, then Burgess was kind of left to explain his work to the world, and Kubrick kind of didn't stand up for it.
And he didn't put the last chapter in the movie either. So the whole point of the book was pretty much neutered out of the movie.
It
had to be fun.
The movie is its own thing. It's a really solid book. The movie conveys the book as well as you can, but the better medium is the book, I would say, just because of the way the language works, and it's a first-person narrative. And again, I think
the language is incredible. It really is. It changes the words that you think of, for things. It's insane. I've never experienced anything like it, to be honest, like any other book that I've ever read, where you actually start to think using words that weren't in your brain before.
Right. Well, do you ever hang out with somebody who has an accent? And then you find yourself talking with that accent after a while, and you're like, oh my god, I'm an asshole. I'm imitating Dr. Sullivan, and what a dick I am. But yeah, the book's the same way. It's you kind of want to work into your vernacular and say...
Start thinking about, Gullivers and Volcheks and Yarbles.
Oh, shut your rot. So, I liked it. I thought the book overall was just,
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I think it's a classic. I think it should be read by. It reminded me of Catcher in the Rye, only more self-aware. I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too. It totally reminds me of Catcher in the Rye. Only there's actually like a denouement at the end. Isn't that the word for like when a character actually like learns something?
Yeah, well, you read it when you were younger. I didn't. So I mean, I'm only reading it as like a horribly mature adult right now. Do you do the book differently now than?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's totally different. The weird thing is, like, when I was a kid, I didn't think twice about. I actually thought the violence was extremely cool. That was what drew me to it originally. Because I mean, things like this didn't exist back then. You know, like it. I don't know. It was just amazing at the time, and now it's almost like I don't know. It's changed big time.
Did you see the movie first, Jim?
I think I read the book in high school and then saw the movie in college. Remember that?
I remember you reading the book in college, actually.
Yeah, I was reading the book in college. I brought it to college with me, and I think I ended up watching the movie after that. It's like kind of blown away by how many naked chicks are getting beaten up in it. It's not something you see every day in the cinema.
You know, Warhol also tried to make a movie of this. I think he did make a movie called Vinyl. I haven't seen it.
Did he? Oh God, that sounds terrible.
Did you know? In the movie, there's that character Julian, who after the writer is beaten, and we see him later. He's got basically a bodyguard. Did you know that guy is the guy who played Darth Vader?
Is he really?
That guy,
like the actual the guy who wore the costume.
Yes, he's the guy who was in the original Star Wars series that wore obviously the speaking role was James Earl Jones, and I think it's because Lucas saw Clockwork Orange.
It's amazing that. That schools don't make a bigger stink about this book. You always hear about Catcher in the Rye getting banned from libraries. You would think they would ban this one a lot more.
It was banned in some places, but not...
It has to be. It absolutely has to be. I mean, it's like... It's weird that he would use like a plot device that's so minor and make it so extreme at the same time. Because I mean, really, like... You say, okay, he killed somebody, or okay, he did this. Like, it doesn't have to be as graphically violent as it was in this. I mean, he went all out. I don't know, what do you think the point of that was? Like, why would you, if you're writing a book about a rapist and a murderer who's getting brainwashed, essentially, and then your plot is going to develop through that, why would you go into such, like, horrible detail on everything? Like, what's the value in that?
The detail to me was kind of lost in trying to pick up. I mean, like, I wasn't fully nuanced in the language until I probably got halfway through the book. So I think a lot of those details were kind of lost on me, you know? I mean, honestly, like, it seemed more like a funny sing-song Englishman talking about his yarbles and someone's rots. And, you know, it didn't seem like that. I mean,
that was done purposely by the author. He said that he was afraid of just writing the violence. Like, that gave him some distance from it.
I mean, I think, hey Ryan, you know when in Cold, or Jim Ryan, I guess, when In Cold Blood came out, the Truman Capote book, that was in the 60s or 50s, right?
You know, I'm not sure.
I've never even read it before.
I mean, it was definitely before this. It was a true crime book. It was very graphic, very violent. It actually influenced a lot of these crime books and novels after it. It was basically the CSI of novelizations, where it didn't mince. I mean, it was very graphic, and you know, and I think a lot of the crime fiction since that point has become more graphic. And I didn't look at this as like like they're ripping out. It wasn't very.
It looks like Clockwork Orange came out 4 years prior to that.
Did it really?
Oh, Clockwork Orange predates it.
Oh, it does. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, 4 years.
This is really a unique work.
Yeah,
it is. It's crazy how strange it is rereading it after all these years. I mean, the words, just the dialect of it is incredible to begin with. And then he wrote 250 songs that no one ever liked. Poor guy.
You guys have any other thoughts about the movie or how it differed than the book? I mean, it's sort of pretty faithful to the book for the most part. I mean, probably more than a lot of movies are.
It is, but it's not. I mean, that whole 21st chapter being cut out of the movie is insane. Like, I mean, that was the whole point of the book. Like, was for it to end that way. And they go back and forth. He said, Burgess said in interviews that he needed the money. and that was why he allowed it to be made without that 21st chapter in the United States.
Well, you're talking about the book. Yeah, the book was published without.
Because he was a broke author. But then, yeah, when the movie was made based on the book that was printed in the United States that didn't have that chapter, like, do you think I wonder if Kubrick knew what he was doing?
He did.
Like, didn't at some point he say that?
No, he did. He said
that we wanted violence, like United States.
He said that chapter was too optimistic. He wasn't aware of the chapter when he started making the movie, but then he was made aware of it, and he said, "Well, I like this version better. We're gonna go with it."
That's kind of ballsy for a director when you think about it. Like, your book that I'm basing my movie on is not good enough for me.
Yeah, but look at The Shining though. Stephen King hates that movie, and he's very bitter about The Shining still to this day.
Is he really?
And Kubrick very, yeah. I mean, look up Stephen King. Stephen King actually commissioned a TV miniseries for The Shining that he produced which is terrible, by the way. But no, Kubrick made The Shining the way he wanted to make it, which wasn't anything like Stephen King's book, which is a very personal story. And really, we're not going to read The Shining on here, but in the book The Shining, the dad is the hero, more or less. He overcomes the demons that are trying to possess him in the hotel, and basically he frees his son and wife and blows up the hotel by letting the boiler explode. And, I mean, that's a very different...
Spoiler,
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the book was written 30 years ago, so I think we're good.
So it's sort of like the same thing he did here, was that he didn't go with the book's ending.
And Kubrick said that before with Kubrick's whole philosophy is it's my movie, goddammit. He's the director. He's going to make what he wants to make.
Although I did read that he was, he very much respected writers, and he would often consult with writers in making the movies. But I guess he would just get their input.
Every director would do that.
No, I think some of them just go off and do their own thing. But I think he had a lot of respect for writers, and he was known for that. But I guess he would ultimately, in the end, do his. Ultimately,
we just give you two examples of him doing the opposite.
You pretty much changed the story entirely.
I mean, and those are the two books that are most famous that he's made in the movies. So I feel like you saying he respects writers is just you saying the opposite of what I'm saying without any validity.
I think it's like he respected writers, and he never wrote his own stuff.
What the hell are you talking about? How?
I think I'm just going to ignore what you said and completely just jump over it and continue my train of thought.
I think he acknowledged that writers wrote things, and he would read what they wrote, because it was words, and it was often on paper, which he would hold in his hand.
See, this is what makes our podcast so special.
He respected writers. You don't respect wood. You don't respect wood, Larry. I respect wood. Sorry.
I don't know. I read it somewhere. I don't remember where.
Did he write it himself? I respect writers.
He probably did. It was in an interview with him and Ellen or something, asking him about how do you feel about writers. I have total respect for them.
2001 was also based on a book where he completely changed. What the fuck are you talking about,
He was
Ryan?
the exact opposite.
Yeah, he would literally make whatever movie he wanted to make that he thought would be best for the screen. I mean, I don't know if that's. I mean, maybe he would invite him to a nice tea party or something, or
I kind of like Stanley Kubrick more now than ever. Not gonna lie, he pretty much did what he wanted. He was a man's man.
Yeah, we had a Kubrick film fest here the last week, and I watched. There's a good documentary on Netflix about The Shining, Room 237.
Wilk, any final thoughts then?
I for people that are still listening, I would really recommend reading the book, buying the book. It's a great book. It really is. I mean, it's an enjoyable read. I liked it more so than the last book we read, but this is more literature, I guess, than a story. It's a good book, and the movie is actually far less violent and graphic than the book. So, but it's a good movie. Watch it with a good surround system and have at you.
Beam?
Yeah, I think this is something that you have to read and watch when you're younger, like 21, 22, to really appreciate it. Because if you're too young, it's going to warp your mind, and if you're too old, you're just going to be like, wow, that's a lot of raping. But if you catch all this at the right age, I think, where the violence isn't going to put you off, and sort of you're into the whole idea of, wow, society really does suck. I didn't know this before. I think it'll hit you right in the sweet spot.
I think the author himself said that the book was sort of too pedantic to be artistic, but I do think it has a lot of artistic depth, and I think it raises, like I've said before, it raises questions about crime and punishment and moral choice, which are interesting and exploring. I think I would recommend, like Jim, you said, to read it at sort of an older level when people are more ready for the content that is involved. And I would say I would read the book first before watching the movie. I think the movie is done well, but I mean, there is a lot of disturbing things in the book. And I think if you get through the book, then you can make the decision if you want to watch the movie, because it's more in your face with the movie. The language doesn't hide it how the book does. And that's it.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. It's very well said.
So tune in next week, or not next week, tune in next month, and we're going to be reading...
I think it's The Running Man.
God, please tell me we're waiting a few weeks for the next one.
Well, the next one should be short. It's pretty short. It's The Running Man by Stephen King, and the movie directed by Paul Michael Glaser, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold.
So tune in next month, fans of our podcast, for another glorious edition.
For more information on this episode's subject matter, and to read our show notes and post your witty comments, visit us at nodeodorant.com. For more information on Ryan Sean O'Reilly and his various works of fiction, visit ryanseanoreilly.com. For more information on David Wilkinson or James Rauch, view their profiles at goodreads.com. The theme music for this podcast was written and composed by John Doyle from the band I Decline. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope you've learned a lot. Oh, and always remember one thing. There is no deodorant in outer space.
Okay, I gotta hold on a second. I have to say goodnight to my kid. I'm talking to my friends. Ryan's gonna have to edit this out. Here, you wanna listen to him?
Hi.